Max battles were first introduced into Pokemon Go in September 2024, and since then we have had a lot of Max and Gigantamax Pokemon debut, but which are the best to power up? Well, in this video we will be going through the best of each type to power up so you don't end up wasting your resources on the wrong Pokemon. Now, just before I get into the first type, I just want to note that tanks are Pokemon that are generally going to be used in normal battle phases. Here they will quickly charge up the max meter whilst taking hits from the max battle boss. There may also be max guard users, which applies a shield to the Pokemon and it taunts the max battle boss to attack this Pokemon over other players' Pokemon. Healers are generally going to be used in the max phase to use max spirit, and because max spirit heals an amount based on the user's HP, you want a Pokemon with high HP for this. And lastly, for attackers, you generally want Pokemon with a high attack stat and a type advantage that can deal as much damage as possible, usually in the max phase, to use their max attacks. Do also note for max Pokemon that the type of fast attack it has determines the type of max attack that it can use during the max phase. However, for Gigantamax Pokemon, the max attack is fixed and it's not determined by the type of the fast attack it uses. So starting off with the normal type, this Pokemon isn't much of an attacking type, with it not being super effective against any type. But with it having only one weakness to fighting, it means they often make pretty good tanks if their defensive stats are decent, and there is one Pokemon of this type in particular that is literally the best general tank and healer in the game, and that is Max Blissey. This Pokemon has the highest HP stat in the game, making it very bulky and making it the best max spirit healer in the game. The higher the HP stat, the bigger the heal. It does also have access to a 0.5 second animation fast attack, which is Pound, that will allow it to charge the max meter fast so you can get to the max phase fast and swap into an attacker. Having a couple of Max Blissey to use as tanks or healers is pretty much a must-have for max battles, because it's going to be one of the best, if not the best tank for pretty much every max battle boss, including many of those that haven't even been released yet. The only small downside is its pretty average defense stat, meaning it doesn't hold on to max guard shields very well, because these shields do provide a flat amount of additional HP in the form of a shield, and you want a high defense to reduce the HP loss. This means that the taunt that comes with max guard that redirects the attack to the max guard user aren't going to be used much with Max Blissey, so it can't protect other players as well as other tanks can. Either way, overall, even with this small downside, Max Blissey is still the best general tank and healer in the game. This Pokemon is a must-have for max battles, and outside of max battles, it is a really good gym defender as well. Similar to Max Blissey, we also have GMax Snorlax, and this Pokemon is a decent tank in its own right, but not as good as Max Blissey and not as accessible either, but it could be an option if you don't have access to Max Blissey. For the fighting type, it is strong against normal, ice, rock, dark, and steel types. This type is very useful because it can hit a range of types for super effective damage, and the best Pokemon for this type as an attacker is Gigantamax Machamp. This Pokemon deals the highest fighting type damage, and it will only be outclassed by Max Pheromosa when it comes to the game in the future, but that could be a long time away, and Machop Candy is a lot easier to gain than Pheromosa Candy because Machop spawns commonly in the wild, and Pheromosa is generally locked to raids for the most part, so it is generally going to be a lot easier to max out a Gigantamax Machamp. This Pokemon is a pretty safe investment for this reason. It doesn't have access to a 0.5 second animation fast attack for charging the max meter fast, but that isn't really much of an issue because you are going to be using GMax Machamp in the max phase for using its max attacks. And if you don't have access to GMax Machamp, a good budget option is Max Machamp. As I mentioned before though, because it is a max Pokemon, it wants to have fast attacks, counter or legacy move Karate Chop, so it has the fighting type max move Max Knuckle. These Pokemon are also going to be good counters for all three of the Regis when they come to max battles, which is probably going to be pretty soon, and you are most likely going to want the Regis for max battles because they do look to be really good tanks with their high defenses, and with the fact you can only have up to 4 people in 5-star max battles, having the best counters like GMax Machamp and Max Machamp powered up is crucial. Outside of max battles, Machamp is also a decent budget fighting type raid attacker, especially for newer players. Moving on to the rock type, which is strong against fire, ice, flying, and bug. This type does generally have quite a lot of Pokemon with high attack and DPS that will come to the game in the future, but at the moment the best we have is Max Omastar. This is the first viable rock type attacker we've had come to max battles so far, and even though it will be outclassed in the future when more rock type attackers come to the game, it could be worth powering up one of these for now because rock covers a lot of legendary Pokemon because a lot of them do have flying typings. Pokemon like Max Zapdos, Moltres, Articuno, and Max Lugia and Ho-Oh when they come to the game, for example. I wouldn't really recommend powering up Max Omastar all the way, just in case we get new rock type attackers that are better soon, but maybe if you can, powering it up to level 40 isn't a bad idea. However, it is worth noting for Max Omastar to be a rock type attacker with Max Rockfall, it does need fast attack Rock Throw, which is a legacy move that will require an elite fast TM to get, which isn't ideal for a Pokemon that will be outclassed soon enough. Without this move, it does have Mud Shot and Water Gun, which are both 0.5 second animation fast attacks, which help Max Omastar to be a decent tank in certain situations with its decent defense stat. We then have the Fire type, which is strong against grass, Grass, Ice, Bug, and Steel types. This type does have some really high damage Pokemon, and 2 stand above the rest. These are GMax Charizard and GMax Cinderace. The latter of the two has the higher attack stat, therefore its max attacks will deal more damage than GMax Charizard, but it is only a small difference between the two. GMax Charizard does however have the flying typing as well, which can make it the better pick in some situations. It does also have access to a 0.5 second animation fast attack in Dragon Breath, and outside of max battles, Mega Charizard Y is the best fire type raid attacker. As a budget option, I would suggest Max Darumaka's evolution Max Darmanitan, which is the best non-GMax fire type attacker currently in the game, and being a max Pokemon, it's much more accessible than GMax Cinderace and Charizard. Do note that it does need Fire Fang or Incinerate as a fast type attack to be able to do Max Flare, and Max Darmanitan is comparable to Max Moltres, but Max Darmanitan has a higher attack stat and it's more accessible. For the grass type, which is strong against water, ground and rock types, this type does see a fair amount of play in the game at the moment, with there being quite a few water type GMax Pokemon, and the Pokemon that sits at the top of this type for attackers is GMax Rillaboom. This is the best one to power up, but second to it we do have GMax Venusaur. It's not as good as an attacker, but its poison typing could see it used defensively in some scenarios. And outside of max battles, Mega Venusaur is the third best grass type attacker with Vine Whip and Frenzy Plant. And for budget options, I would recommend Max Rillaboom, which isn't too far behind GMax Venusaur in terms of an attacker, and it is easier to obtain than both of the GMax Pokemon, with Max Grookey being in 1-star max battles. Now for the water type, which is strong against fire, ground and rock, the best attacker to power up here is GMax Inteleon. In second place we have GMax Kingler, and in third place is a great budget option being Max Inteleon with Water Gun. This Pokemon's high attack stat means that even as a max Pokemon it deals more damage than GMax Blastoise, which is the 4th place in terms of damage. However, GMax Blastoise is more of a tank because of its decent defense stat and access to 0.5 second animation fast attacks, Bite and Water Gun. But as the only difference between a max and GMax Pokemon is the extra 100 power that a GMax move has, you could just use Max Blastoise as a tank, which is a lot easier because Max Squirtle is only in 1-star max battles, therefore easily soloable. And comparatively, 6-star GMax battles take more trainers, time, resources and max particles to do. So unless you want GMax Blastoise as a bit of an attacker as well, if you don't have access to the other 3 that are better, it's just worth using Max Blastoise as a tank. Blastoise does also have relevance outside of max battles, with Mega Blastoise being the 4th best water type attacker with Water Gun and Legacy move Hydro Cannon, and Blastoise itself is ranked 71 in the Great League and ranked 41 in the Ultra League. So overall, my recommendation for the water type is to use GMax Inteleon for attacking, Max Inteleon if you can't get access to the GMax form, and you can use Max Blastoise for water type tanking. Next we have the ground type, which is strong against fire, electric, poison, rock and steel type attacks. So again, like the fighting type, it is able to hit 5 types for super effective damage, so definitely a useful type to have access to. So currently the best ground type attacker to power up is Max Excadrill with Mudshot. Being a max Pokemon, it can use its steel type fast attack Metal Claw to double up as a decent steel type attacker as well. Not only that, but it is strong as a tank and healer as well. Both Mudshot and Metal Claw are 0.5 second animation fast attacks, allowing it to charge the max meter faster, and also its typing does come with a lot of resistances. It also has a high HP stat that makes it a decent max spirit user. As a ground type attacker, it will be outclassed by a few of the big hitters in the future, but its utility in many different roles will keep it relevant. With it being a max Pokemon as well, it's pretty budget friendly, with Max Drillbur being available through 1-star max battles. Having access to Max Drillbur and Max Excadrill can be useful for gaining candy through leaving them at power spots for powering up Shadow Excadrill, because it is the 6th best ground type attacker with Mud Slap and Scorching Sands, and it's the 8th best steel type raid attacker with Metal Claw and Iron Head. Moving on to the electric type, which is strong against flying and water. These happen to be 2 of the most common types in the game, meaning the best electric types are useful in a lot of scenarios, and the top electric types are pretty competitive with competing types. The best Pokemon to power up for this type is GMax Toxtricity, and it is a pretty safe investment because it'll most likely only be outclassed by Max Xurkitree when that comes to the game, but that'll most likely be a while off. And the candy for Toxtricity will generally be easier to obtain than candy for Xurkitree, which is locked to raids for the most part. The second best electric type for max battles is Max Zapdos, which does want Legacy move Thundershock to be at its best, which will require an elite fast TM to get. Alternatively though, not quite as good as an attacker is Max Raikou, which can be useful because it doesn't require an elite fast TM. For tanks, Max Zapdos and Max Raikou are going to be the 2 options. Max Raikou is more bulky in that it does have a little bit more defense, but Max Zapdos' flying typing mean it resists 3 more types. Now for the flying type, which is strong against grass, fighting and bug, this type does have more of a niche use, but there are some pretty strong Pokemon for this type that could come in the future, like Max Rayquaza for example. And at the moment, the best flying type we have is Max and Pheasant with Air Slash for Max Airstream. This Pokemon, however, is going to be outclassed probably in the not too distant future, so do bear that in mind when you're considering powering one up. An alternative that is pretty close to Max and Pheasant is Max Charizard with Air Slash from Max Airstream. When it comes to tanks, we have Max Corviknight. Whilst not the best attacker because of its lower attack stat, its typing and HP bulk mean it is a strong tank and decent healer. We then have the Bug type, which is strong against Psychic, Dark and Grass types. This is one of the weaker types in the game because there are stronger types that can do its job better. However, when something has a double weakness to Bug, the best Bug types can be useful. So if you did want to power up a Bug type attacker for max battles, the best we currently have as an attacker is GMax Butterfree, which will be able to outclass GMax Orbeetle when it comes to the game in the future because Butterfree does have the higher attack stat. GMax Orbeetle, however, is more of a tank with its much higher defense stat. The issue though with GMax Butterfree as an attacker is that there are many other max Bug types that will come to the game in the future that will be better than it. Overall, the Bug type isn't much of a priority. For Psychic types, which are strong against fighting and poison types, being only super effective to these two types mean the Psychic type is quite niche, but there are some powerful Pokemon for this type already in the game. The best Psychic type attacker for max battles currently is Max Latios with its high attack stat, and it does want the fast attack Zen Headbutt for Max Mindstorm for this role. There will be better Psychic type attackers for max battles in the future, but this Pokemon can put up some competition. Outside of max battles, it can be used as Mega Latios as well, which is the 6th best Psychic type attacker with Zen Headbutt and Psychic, and its 11th best Dragon type raid attacker with Dragon Breath and Metal Claw. Not far off from Max Latios in terms of damage as a Psychic type attacker is Max Metagross. This Pokemon can also be used defensively with the 0.5 second animation fast attack Fury Cutter to build the max meter fast, and its typing and defenses do also help to make it a solid tank. Again, Metagross does have relevance outside of max battles, with it being the 6th best steel type raid attacker with Bullet Punch and legacy move Meteor Mash. It's also ranked 23 in the Master League, which is really good for the Master League for a non-legendary or mythical Pokemon, which do tend to dominate the higher ranks. There is also the option of using Max Hatena, but I wouldn't invest too much in this Pokemon because it does have a Gmax form coming in the future that will outclass it. Next, we do have the Poison type, which is strong against Grass and Fairy types. Again, like the Psychic type, this type can be quite niche with it only hitting 2 types of super effective damage, but it does have some uses. You could use Max Toxtricity with Poison Jab. Moving on to the Fairy type, which is strong against Dragon, Fighting and Dark types. This type will come in useful against Dragon type legendaries, for example, where it can deal super effective damage and it can resist Dragon type attacks. However, a lot of Fairy types in the game so far don't seem to be able to compete in damage to other competitive types. But if you're looking to power up a Fairy type, the current best we have for max battles is Max Hatterini with Charm. Again, like I mentioned before, I wouldn't put too many resources into this Pokemon yet because it will be outclassed by its Gmax form that will come to the game in the future. In the meantime though, it does provide some decent Fairy type damage against pure Dragon types just behind Max Latios. Speaking of the Dragon type, it is super effective against the Dragon type only, but despite this, it is one of the best types in the game. There are many Dragon type legendary Pokemon that will eventually come to max battles, and other Dragon types will generally be the best attackers for them because of how high the attack of some of these Pokemon are. And in max battles, as attackers generally don't need to worry about taking the Dragon type damage because you are going to be using them in the max phase. This means they're going to be even more relevant. And the best Dragon type attacker for max battles is Eternatus, especially with its legacy move Dynamax Cannon, which has the same power levels as a Gmax move, making it a very strong Pokemon. This move does also come with an adventure effect that increases the level of your max moves of your Pokemon temporarily by 1 level. This will temporarily increase a locked max move to level 1 and a maxed out max move to above that at level 4. This makes this Pokemon even more valuable. As well as its high attack, it does have a high HP and decent defenses, giving it some bulk and use as a max spirit user. Not only that, but outside of max battles, Eternatus is up there with the best Dragon and Poison type raid attackers in the game, and it's one of the best overall damage dealers in the game. And it does also seem like it will be useful in the Master League as well. Another option is going to be Max Latios with Dragon Breath and Max Wyrmwind. This Pokemon is a strong Dragon type attacker in its own right, and it does have access to a 0.5 second animation fast attack Dragon Breath to quickly charge the max meter if required. The best Dragon type tank we have is currently Max Latias. This Pokemon's best stat is defense, making it a really good tank and a good max guard user in particular, because as max guard is a HP addition, having high defense means that less HP is taking off when attacked, so it can hold on to those max guard shields for longer. It also has a 0.5 second animation fast attack Dragon Breath to quickly fill the max meter, and it has quite a few resistances. It does seem like it will be outclassed as a tank in the future, but for now it is very useful. Moving on to the Steel type, which is super effective against Rock, Ice and Fairy types. This type isn't called on for that often, but its top Pokemon for max battles are so strong that they are used as counters for a lot of Pokemon at the moment, in a similar way for how Max Blissey is used as a tank for a lot of Pokemon. The best Steel type attacker to power up for max battles is Crown Sword Zacian. This Pokemon is a must-have with its super high attack stat and very useful Behemoth Blade adventure effect, which boosts the attack of Pokemon in raids and in max battles. It does have competition as a Steel type attacker, however, with its counterpart Crown Shield Zamazenta, which does have a really high total damage output thanks to its signature move Behemoth Bash, and it has only a little bit less DPS DPS than Zacian. However, it is as a tank where this Pokemon shines the most. This Pokemon has a really high defense stat, making it very tanky. It does also have the unique ability of starting with a max guard shield already up if it has max guard unlocked to level 1 already, and its really high defense does pair well with max guard. Crown Zacian is a pretty tanky Pokemon as well, with its typing making it weak to only fire and ground type attacks. Its defense stat is also really good. By no means is it bad, it's just not quite on the same level as Crown Zamazenta. Crown Shield Zamazenta's Behemoth Bash does also have an adventure effect which increases the defense of Pokemon in raids and max battles. Alongside Crown Zacian, Crown Zamazenta is also a must-have, being a very strong tank and steel type attacker. Outside of max battles, both of these Pokemon are relevant as well. Crown Zacian is the number 1 steel type raid attacker and Crown Zamazenta is ranked 2, and in the Master League, Crown Zamazenta is number 1 and Crown Zacian is number 2. So overall, these Pokemon are definitely worth having access to. As a budget option, if you don't have access to these Pokemon, Max Metagross is a strong steel type attacker for max battles as well. Moving on to the Dark type, which is strong against Psychic and Ghost types. This type is strong against the same types that Ghost is, but the Dark type does resist both of those types as well, so useful in defensive scenarios as well as offensively. The best Dark type attacker we have currently for max battles is Max Urshifu Single Strike with Sucker Punch for max darkness. This Pokemon has a strong attack stat and Sucker Punch is a 0.5 second animation fast attack. The downsides, however, are the fact that it will be outclassed by its own GMax form in the future, and it is a bit of a time consuming evolution from Kubfu into the Single Strike form because you need to make Kubfu your buddy and defeat 30 Dark type Pokemon in raids or max battles, so it isn't the most easily accessible Pokemon. Do note as well that as Dark and Ghost types do compete in situations where they are both super effective, it means that as an attacker, GMax Gengar will be used instead of GMax Urshifu Single Strike. And speaking of Ghost types, they are strong against Psychic and Ghost types. The top Ghost types can be very powerful, and in particular GMax Gengar is well worth investing in. It has one of the highest attack stats amongst the GMax Pokemon, making it one of the best damage dealers for max battles. It's the best Ghost type attacker and unlikely to be outclassed in the future, so it is a safe investment, and Ghastly is a pretty common spawn, so Candy is relatively easy to get. Not only that, but outside of max battles, Mega Gengar is the second best Ghost type attacker with Lick and Shadow Ball, and it's the best Poison type raid attacker with Lick and Sludge Bomb. For a budget max battle Ghost type attacker, you are going to want to go with Max Gengar with Shadow Claw for max Phantasm. And lastly, for the Ice types, which are strong against Dragon, Flying, Grass and Ground types, this again is one of those types that can deal super effective damage to a range of types, but often Ice types do lack DPS compared to their competition, apart from some of the top Ice type attackers. For max battles, however, the best Ice type attacker we currently have is GMax Lapras, despite its relatively low attack stat, so it will be outclassed in the future as an attacker. However, it is as a tank where it shines the most. It has decent defense and a pretty high HP stat, meaning it is a strong max spirit user. It does also have access to a 0.5 second animation fast attack water gun. The only other option as Ice type attackers are Max Articuno and Max Cryogonal, which are comparable, so I would recommend going with Max Cryogonal if you have to, with it being a lot more accessible than Articuno. It isn't really worth using much Stardust on this Pokemon though. Now, if you want to know the best Pokemon to power up for raid attacking and some budget options as well, then I recommend checking out this video on the screen next.